Well, let me ask you a human question here. You've in the game design space, you've done a lot of incredible work throughout, but in terms of game design, you have changed the world, and there's a few people around you that did the same. So famously, there's some animosity, there's much love, but there's some animosity between you and John Romero. What is at the core of that animosity and human tension? And
So there really hasn't been for a long time, and even at the beginning, it's like, yes, I did push Romero out of the company, and this is one of the things that I look back. If I could go back telling my younger self some advice about things, the original founding kind of corporate structure of id Software really led to a bunch of problems. We started off with us as equal partners, and we had a buy-sell agreement because we didn't want outsiders to be telling us what to do inside the company. And that did lead to a bunch of the problems where I was sitting here going, it's like, all right, I'm working harder than anyone. I'm doing these technologies, nobody's done before, but we're all equal partners. And then I see, somebody that's not working as hard, and it's, I mean, I can't say I was the most mature about that. I was, 20 something years old, and it did bother me when I'm like, everybody, okay, we need to all pull together, and we've done it before. Everybody, we know we can do this if we get together and we grind it all out. But not everybody wanted to do that for all time, and I was the youngest one of the crowd there. I had different sets of kind of backgrounds and motivations, and left at that point where it was, all right, either everybody has to be contributing like up to this level, or they need to get pushed out, was not, that was not a great situation. And I look back on it, and no, we pushed people out of the company that could have contributed if there was a different framework for them. And the modern kind of Silicon Valley, like, let your stock vest over a time period, and maybe it's non-voting stock and all those different things. We knew nothing about any of that. I mean, we didn't know what we were doing in terms of corporate structure or anything.
so, if you think the framework was different, some of the human tension could have been a little bit
It
alleviated.
almost certainly would have. I mean, I look back at that, and it's like, even trying to sum it up in my mind, it's like, I know I was really, really angry about, like Romero not working as hard as I wanted him to work, or not carrying his load on the design for Quake and coming up with things there. But, he was definitely doing things. He made some of the best levels there. He was working with some of our external teams like Raven on the licensing side of things. But but there were differences of opinion about it. But he landed, right on his feet. He got $20 million from IDOS to go do Ion Storm, and he got to do things his way and spun up 3 teams simultaneously, because that was always one of the challenging things in id, where we were doing these single string, one project after another. And I think some of them, wanted to grow the company more. And I didn't, because I knew people that were saying that, oh, companies turn to shit when you got 50 employees. It's just a different world there. And I loved our little dozen people working on the projects. But you can look at it and say, well, business realities matter. It's like, you're super successful here, and we could take a swing and a miss on something, but you do it a couple times and you're out of luck. There's a reason companies try to have multiple teams running at one time. And so that was, again, something I didn't really appreciate back then.
So if you look past all that, you did create some amazing things together. What did you love about John Romero? What did you respect and appreciate about him? What did you admire about him? What did you learn from him?
When I met him, he was the coolest programmer I had ever met. He had done all of this stuff. He had made all of these games. He had worked at, one of the companies that I thought was the coolest, at Origin Systems. And he knew all this stuff. He made things happen fast. And he was also kind of a polymath about this, where he drew his own art. He made his own levels, as well as, he worked on sound design systems on top of actually being a really good programmer. And we had, we went through it was kind of fun, where one of the early things that we did, where there was kind of the young buck bit going in, where I was the new guy, and he was the top man programmer at the soft disk area. And eventually we had sort of a challenge over the weekend that we were going to like race to implement this game, to port one of our PC games back down to the Apple II. And that was where we finally kind of became clear. It's like, okay, Carmack stands a little bit apart on the programming side of things. And, but Romero then very gracefully moved into, well, he'll work on the tools, he'll work on the systems, do some of the game design stuff, as well as contributing on, starting to lead the design aspects of a lot of things. So he was, enormously valuable in the early stuff, and so much of Doom and even Quake have his stamp on it in a lot of ways. But he wasn't at the same level of focus that I brought to the work that we were doing there, and he really did. We hit such a degree of success that it was all in the press about that. The Rockstar game programmers.
Yeah. And, it's the Beatles problem.
Yeah. I mean, and he ate it up, and he did personify. There was the whole game developers with, with Ferraris that we had there. And I thought that, that led to some challenges there, but so much of the stuff that was great in the games did come from him, and I would certainly not take that away from him. And even after we parted ways and he took his swing with IDOS, in some ways he was ahead of the curve with mobile gaming as well, where one of his companies after IDOS was working on feature phone game development. And I wound up doing some of that just before the iPhone, crossing over into the iPhone phase there. And that was something that clearly did turn out to be a huge thing, although he was too early for what he was working on at that time. We've had pretty cordial relationships where I was happy to talk with him anytime I'd run into him at a conference. I have actually had some other people just say it's like, oh, you shouldn't go over there and give him the time of day, or felt that Masters of Doom was played things up in a way that I shouldn't be too happy with, but I'm okay with all of that. And
so you still got love in your heart.
Yeah, I mean, I just talked with him last year, or I guess it was even this year, about mentioning that I'm going off doing this AI stuff. I'm going big into artificial intelligence, and he had a bunch of ideas for how AI is going to play into gaming, and asked if I was interested in collaborating. And it's not in line with what I'm doing, but I do. I wish almost everyone the best. I mean, I know I may not have parted on the best of terms with some people, but I was thrilled to see Tom Hall writing VR games now. He wrote, working on a game called Demio, which is really an awesome VR game. It's like Dungeons and Dragons. We all used to play Dungeons and Dragons together. That was one of the things, that was what we did on Sundays in the early id days. I would dungeon master and they'd all play. And so it really made me smile seeing Tom involved with an RPG game in virtual reality.